Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Blabbit. Blabbit is brought to you by Open Doors, your premier partner in internal communication and broadcasting systems. For those of you who have not been on Blabbit before, my name is Glenn Ingram. Along with Paul Geiger, we bring experts on every week to pick their brains, ask them questions, and really get to know all the things that we normally would have to pay them for. I've been working in the sales arena and training and coaching salespeople for the better part of the last 2 decades, trying to help people become better communicators and influencers. Good morning, Paul. How are you?
I'm doing well, Glenn. And we have a treat here. We've actually picked this guest expert's brain before, but luckily she has so much to spare that she's got much more to share with us, which is a wonderful thing. But for those of you who are here for the first time, hello, my name is Paul Geiger. I am a public speaking coach and presentation expert out of New York City. And just like Glenn, I work a lot on communications, mostly building up people's confidence so that they can deliver a really clear message when the stakes are high. Hello, Jennifer. It's great to have you back. Tell everybody a little bit about you.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me back again.
Sure. Our pleasure. So give everybody a little rundown on who you are.
So, my name's Jennifer Garman. I am a life, wellness, and mindset coach, and I'm also a certified hypnotherapist. And I've been on before, and I think we talked at great length about gratitude last time I was on.
Yes, we did.
So can we or can we not hypnotize Paul into clucking like a chicken while we're on the show?
No, I'm not able to do that. Sorry, I'm not that kind of hypnotherapist.
Okay, I thought it was worth a shot. Let's jump into a little bit of mindset, whichever kind of techniques you're using. Why it doesn't seem that it's a common trait for people to focus on what if instead of just doing things and letting life happen, and not letting the what if get in the way of them being able to accomplish different goals or different tactics or techniques in their life.
Yeah, that's a great question, and so many people get stuck in that. It's we have a negative bias tendency, and we're born with that. It's kind of the way our brain operates. So we're always focused and looking for what's wrong, what can go wrong. And if it goes wrong, what do I do? And it's very hard, very, very difficult because we're pre-programmed this way to get out of that. So that is the unfortunate reality of most people. And it's a lot of what encompasses their thought life and therefore their lives in general, because you are a reflection of your thought life. So if you're always looking for what can go wrong, what's negative, what's not right, you're going to bring in more of what can go wrong, what's negative, what's not right. Unfortunately, It's the reality of the world right now.
All right. Well, as Glenn had mentioned before, there's a certain preconception about hypnosis. And it's interesting, since the last time that you joined us, you've really ratcheted up your hypnotherapy. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about that. We'll maybe start with, what are some of the big misconceptions that most people have about hypnosis?
Yeah, well, it's funny that you asked about the chicken, because I get that more often than anything is, well, I don't want to turn into a chicken and make a fool of myself in front of other people. And that's the biggest misconception of hypnosis, is that someone is going to have control over your mind and you will have no recollection of it. You won't remember anything, but they're going to get you to do embarrassing stuff. And it could not be further from the truth, honestly. It's not what hypnosis is about. Truly what hypnosis is it's a tool for stepping out of our heads. And when we can get out of our heads, we can clearly pivot and see things from a different perspective. And that shift that you can make by stepping back and assessing things from a rational point of view inside your head, so to speak, your subconscious, is what allows you to make a shift in paradigm and kind of cut off the pre-programmed tapes that are playing on a subconscious level and make changes.
Mm-hmm. So can you accomplish the same thing just by going on vacation? Or is that two different things? Because I don't know the answer to this. I'm just asking out of curiosity, because it seems like going on vacation too is a very time consuming and focus demanding activity, even though we're supposed to relax and get a different perspective on work. What's your take on that?
Yeah, Yeah, well, I'm all for vacation. I highly recommend as many and all vacations that you can possibly squeeze into your life. They're wonderful. But what people have a hard time doing is they can shift out of the work life and they can go on vacation. They can have a great time. They can step out of who they are. But then you get pulled back into it because ironically, we are running on subconscious. So 95% of our life, we are kind of on autopilot. I don't know if you've ever gotten in your car and you've gone to a familiar place like grocery store somewhere and you just kind of zone out and all of a sudden you're there and you're like, oh, I don't remember driving here. You know, you were on autopilot. And unfortunately, that is 95% of our lives. And it's really hard to get out of that unless you are consciously aware that, oh, I'm going into autopilot again, got to step back into the present, got to step back into, taking my thoughts captive and, realizing what I'm doing on a purposeful, conscious effort. It's very hard to do. So while I agree with you, vacations are great. In the real world, it's really hard to operate in that realm of, I'm going to be conscious, I'm going to be aware, I'm going to make choices and thoughts that serve me.
Now, I know in a lot of times when we look at different things with our relation to our brain, it's a muscle that can be trained like any muscle you can in your body. So
Yes.
Is that a good way, and is it possible to train your subconscious to work with your conscious better over a period of time so that you are more in control of some of these thoughts, some of these actions, some of these things like that?
Well, yes and no. So what you just described, you can't really work with your subconscious, but what you can do is you can rewire programs in your subconscious that aren't working for you. And that would be, negative thought patterns, limiting beliefs, anxieties, phobias, fears, procrastination. There's all kinds of things that you can go in and say, you know what, this isn't serving me well. And I'd like to address this from a root level and kind of reassess how I deal with situations in the future. And that can be very, very beneficial. Hypnosis is actually a great way to be able to do that. There's other modalities and ways as well. And it's funny because hypnosis doesn't work for everyone. Everyone, about 8% of the population, they will not let someone else into their subconscious thought life. And if I can talk just a little bit about the conscious, the subconscious, and the unconscious, actually. If you think of an iceberg, so you think of an iceberg and everybody has this, thought that probably comes to mind is just you're seeing the tip of the iceberg outside the water. And that's really what our conscious is. That's about the 5% that we're living in on an average person's, daily basis. That's about 5% of the time we're conscious, we're aware. And then you go down a layer and just under the water, you've got the subconscious. And so in the conscious level, we've got our thoughts and our perceptions. And then we go down to the subconscious and we've got more of memories and knowledge that we're drawing from. And then if you go deeper into the depths, you're actually going into the unconscious. And that's where we've got things like instincts, motives, our fears, our desires, our beliefs. Everything is down at that layer. And that's something that we can't just say, okay, I'm going to go access that now and I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to, deal with this in the conscious. Because if you think of the conscious like it's your head, and then you go down a level and then you're kind of getting into more of your heart, and then you go down another level into the unconscious, and that's really where your intuition is. And that's honestly where the truth is and the root is of a lot of what people deal with. And there really are tapes that are playing in our heads that we're not aware of. And this is where it's all coming from.
So are these challenges almost, for lack of a better word, and I'm sure you can probably come up with a better word, self-inflicted challenges? Are they all based on fear? Is it because I can desire to change? I can have such a strong desire, and yet in the areas where I need to change, I'm still held back. So is fear the stronger, more primal emotion, mindset? What's your take on that?
I believe fear is probably the number one. Yes. But there's other things in there too. Self-worth is a big one that we find down there as well, which, the tie into fear, you can argue it each way. But so what a lot of people don't realize is by the time we're about 7 years old, most scientists would agree that we have formed pretty much the perception of who we are and how we fit into this world and how things work. And all of the beliefs and everything that's down in the subconscious and unconscious level is formed by the time we're 7 years old. So if you think of it from that perspective, and you think of a 7-year-old, their reality and their perception of the world may not be correct a lot of times. And if you also think of everything as relational. So when we're that age, and even when we're older and as adults, we look at things and we perceive things by a relational aspect. You know, how do I fit into this? How can I relate to it? That's our perception, is how we fit in and how, things are in perspective to us. So when you look at, the 95% of our lives, of our thought lives, is formed before we're 7 years old, there may be some things that aren't correct, or that could maybe be up for a little bit of change or tweaking.
Well, you know what, Glenn? That explains why I still have superhero t-shirts. That's established at 7.
Well, and especially on males. I mean, you remember that episode of Seinfeld where it was just at that age we had to determine which superhero we were going to be for the rest of our life. That's why a guy can drive down the street with a mattress on top of his car, holding it with one hand, because he's a superhero.
And that would do it. So it's interesting. You just one more question. Obviously not one more, but just please, I'm going to add one in. You said that there are people who won't let other people in. Is it because is that a sense of fear? Is that something that's holding back that fear of somebody else having control? Is there a whole additional layer going on there? It's not because they're necessarily more intelligent or they're more in charge of everything, but they want that illusion of it and they hold on to that belief.
Yeah, I would say fear and trust, again, which, they can go hand in hand, but it tends to be that we need to do a little bit more work on trust and issues that could potentially be there in the past with that before they'll open up and let someone kind of into a subconscious layer of their thoughts.
Okay.
Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about, subconscious, unconscious, stuff like that. I remember back in my younger days having a football coach that preached psychocybernetics with us. Going through the night before, putting yourself in a position of doing something on the court, something on a field and stuff like that. And it was interesting that inevitably when you did that, something would happen similar to that while you're in an athletic event. And it was almost like at that point, it was second nature. Yeah. So if we can train ourselves to do that athletically, why can't we train ourselves to do that personally, professionally, or things like that to maybe have a different reaction from the subconscious than what we normally have?
Yeah, and you've honestly hit the nail on the head, because that's typically where we're coming from. I've heard a lot of coaches say, you can't think, you just have to do. And that's so true. And it's in life too, that we don't have time to say, okay, wait a minute, what should I do here? I'm going to assess this direction and that. Life doesn't work that way. When we're in conversation or when we're in interaction with people, we just kind of have to go from our gut sometimes. And when we can train our subconscious to be running different tapes, that, I can do this, I've got this, I've seen myself do it, I believe it, that kind of thing, then you're right. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and things tend to go that way versus go in the opposite direction.
So are most of the changes that your clients are looking for, is it a matter of doing something or is it a matter of not doing something?
Well, both. What you're really talking about here is getting into the layers of limiting beliefs and negative thought patterns. And when you can dig down into those layers and address the root causes of them and actually see the perspective of like, okay, this formed at this time of my life because of this reason. But it's been carrying on through my whole life into adulthood, and it's not serving me anymore. So I'm going to shift my perspective and say, okay, I can see why I was doing this. It doesn't make a lot of sense, even though this tape was running and I keep doing it. But I'm going to shift and I'm going to create this new pattern where I do it a different way. And I rehearse that and I go through that. And it may take a little bit of time and effort, but it's absolutely doable. You can teach an old dog new tricks. Something called neuroplasticity. It's very real, it's very effective, and it's absolutely life-changing and transformative for people that have been stuck in negative thought patterns and limiting beliefs.
So how much of a challenge do you come in contact with getting people to understand that the difference between excitement and anxiety is about that thick, because they're the same chemicals being released to your brain, the same synapses. It's just some of us look at jumping up on a stage as excitement, and some of us look at jumping on a stage and say, oh, holy, you know what? So how do you get them to understand it's a fine line? You only have to tweak a little bit. You don't have to change your entire personality.
Yeah, well, that's true. And honestly, it's not convincing them, more so that it is, taking them down through the layers. So what I do a lot of times in hypnosis, when people are dealing with, phobias and irrational fears and whatnot, is we drop down through layers. So we start at the conscious level and we start kind of going through like, okay, let's look at it from this perspective. What emotions is it bringing up? And let's kind of explore those emotions and, what could be causing these emotions. Then we drop down more into a subconscious level and we assess it from that level. And I honestly, I take the clients kind of outside their body so that they're looking at themselves from a third person perspective to see like, okay, what's going on? And I'm assessing this person and what they're going through and what they're thinking, but from outside of myself. And this is kind of viewing things from the subconscious level. And then we can even take it a step down further into the unconscious and say like, okay, what's the root of this? What happened when I was younger that could have triggered something like this? And it's very effective and kind of amazing to me still that we can kind of access that far back. Even if you don't remember being a certain age, it's funny because you remember the emotions. The emotions are the memories that get implanted into our brain and stick there. And it's crazy how these emotions will come back out that we can address and we can kind of shift perspective on.
It's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, I was with a group and they were saying, just recall and share with everyone in the group your earliest childhood memory, something that you remember. And it was interesting. Some people could remember, they said, back to about 3.5 years old, something like that. Is there sort of a cutoff point that most people can remember? And then the rest of it is down so deep in muscle and life memory that it's really hard to bring to the conscious. Have you experienced that?
Yes, absolutely. From a conscious perspective, most people can't go much back beyond 5 or 6 years old. But when we drop down into the subconscious and especially into the unconscious, people can go back to, birth sometimes. And we'll kind of do this timeline thing. Certain clients I'll do this with, where we'll go back and we'll say, okay, and they're granted, they're in the conscious or the subconscious level, subconscious or unconscious level at this point. But we're going back and we're saying, okay, is there an earlier remembering of this emotion or of this belief that we can go back even further to? And we clear it from very, very, very early in childhood. And when we clear that, it's just such a release and kind of like a weight is lifting off their shoulders type feeling when they come out of the hypnosis session, which really, and it's not something that, you're unaware of. You can remember everything when you come out of it, but they're like, wow, I didn't realize that it had gone back that far. But when you trust your higher self and your gut instinct to say, okay, can we go further back? Is there more to it than this? And you just trust. And a lot of times it does go back, and you do go back further. You don't necessarily remember it, but you intuitively know it goes further back.
It's just, and I believe everything you said there about the first 7 years of your life, but it's just almost scary that how much of a formative space that is, time that is, when you really don't really know much about the world, about life, or about things like this, and you spend the next 50, 60, 70 years trying to unconfuse that confusion of the first 7.
It's so true.
I guess, is it a matter of your circumstances reinforcing or changing as you go through life from, let's say, being pretty much formed by 7? Are the rest of the experiences you're having reinforcing that or changing that, perhaps?
They can be, unless something that happened when you were early and young was very traumatic, and that is going to be a placeholder for the rest of your life unless you do some serious work on it. So there's traumas with a capital T, and then there's traumas with a lowercase t. And a lot of times those capital T traumas, and I'm talking about like, a car accident, losing a very close loved one during those formative years can really be a trauma with a capital T that can offset somebody regardless of circumstances. You can put the best intentions, the best circumstances, everything in place, and that will still trump anything that comes by. That person will just say, nope, this is how it is, and I'm not going to change my beliefs.
So putting the capital T's aside for just a moment, let's look at the small t's, because obviously a big traumatic event in anyone's life is life-altering, life-changing. But would you say that most of the smaller traumatic things are really primarily ego-based, primarily rejection-based? Or is that too general?
It's hard to say, but I believe that is a big component of it, especially when we're, in the formative years before 3 years old. If we have a rift from a parent, an emotional rift from a parent, that is a trauma with a capital T, no doubt. That is absolutely huge. And there's other things too that I would say, when you define a trauma with a capital T or a lowercase t, it's all about perspective. So we could look at something that happened to a child and say, oh, that's not that big a deal. But to that child, that is everything. And at that time in life, that is the most traumatic thing that they could have gone through to them. So it's about perception too. There's just so many factors that are involved here that it's impossible to say, well, that happened, that can't possibly be why they're acting like this when they're 30 years old. But in their perspective space at that time, it very well could, if that makes sense.
This kind of goes back to what we were talking about Victoria Grimman last time she was on, Paul, about PTSD. And we all associate PTSD with the capitals, but there are probably many more limiting things. We have a different level of PTSD with the smaller case T's. What do you think about that?
Yes.
I mean, smaller traumas are going to probably amount to more of our limiting capabilities, limiting beliefs than just the major ones, because there's so many smaller little trauma things that are in the back of your brain saying this happened, then it's going to happen again. This happened, then it's going to happen again. So how do we find a way to let ourselves go? Happen in the past doesn't mean it's going to happen in the future.
Well, if I can speak to that, there is a modality called EMDR that is very effective for PTSD and big traumas that happen to people where they're like, I can pinpoint exactly when it was. This is when everything changed. It was from this event. That's not really what I deal with hypnosis. EMDR is a much more effective tool for that type of thing. And there's some great caregivers and therapists that I refer out to for that modality. But a lot of times people don't know what it is. And that's really where hypnotherapy can be of value, is when they're saying, there's just got to be something. I picked this up at some point, but I don't know where and I don't know why. And that's really where we can dig into, okay, let's find out what the where is and the why, and kind of alleviate that all-encompassing viewpoint and perspective on everything else in your life.
Well, now for anyone who is eager to explore this possibility, is there a timeline for this sort of thing? Does it take weeks, months, years? Is it just an ongoing process, or
No.
is there do you hit a crossroads, or do you hit a place where the switch gets flipped even momentarily and you can feel that success? Is there a basic guidelines that you can give us?
Yeah, so typically most people need about, I would say as little as 3. It's kind of rare, but usually the sweet spot is about 5 to 8 sessions of the hypnotherapy, where we can really, because the first 1 or 2, unless somebody's just really receptive and open to kind of just digging down in there. A lot of people have resistance though. And the first few sessions are just kind of going against that resistance and trying just to go a little bit deeper and getting to the point where they're more comfortable. But there are people in 3 sessions and they're done and they're ready to just take on life in a new way, and they're thrilled. But for the most part, and it is very quick, we can do this in a matter of a month or 2, where we go through about 5 to 8 sessions on average. and just kind of dig deep and dig into the root causes and reassociate things.
Now, before when you were on here, we talked about gratitude, and I've been having a lot of conversations with people about gratitude. So I'd like to know what your perception is with these self-limiting beliefs and the lack of gratitude. And the reason I ask that is I've said this for years, I have to be appreciative of the negative things in my life as well as the positive things in my life if I'm happy with where I am today. Because had one of those things not happened, I would have been on some sort of a different path. So if you have gratitude and you can accept those negative things, are they less limiting or more limiting, or what's your opinion on that?
I have always been of same thought patterns as you with that, you know, we if we didn't have negative in life, we wouldn't have the contrast to see how good it is when it's good. So that is one of the great things about gratitude. One of the books that I love is by Byron Katie. It's called Loving What Is. And what her book encompasses is that, you know, you could look at any situation and pull the good out of it and, you know, be grateful for it and embrace it. And that's really where the problem lies, is when we have a different perspective and say, oh, I don't like this. I'm resistant against this. I'm going to just stand my ground and not even let myself get into that emotion. We have to move through the negative to get back to the positive. And if we can have gratitude in that, you know, this is moving me towards something that I want. I'm growing in this experience and I'm grateful for it in that aspect. I think I spoke last time I was on that I went through a 7-year mystery illness. And at the time, I was not grateful that I was going through this illness. But as I came out of it and I healed and I look back, I have immense gratitude for that time in my life because my growth was exponential. And this is something that I talk about with clients, is when we look back on the hard, difficult times in our lives and we look at their growth patterns, 9 times out of 10, it's those difficult times that we had huge growth spurts in our lives, in our emotional or awareness of ourselves or of other people and situations. It's just like, it's monumental, the growth that happened during those negative times. So if you can take that perspective and allow that to become your norm, that in the future, okay, negative things are going to happen. It's inevitable, but I'm going to grow when those negative things happen. And then therefore I'm going to have gratitude for them when they're happening and know that there's, you know, it's a finite time. They're not going to be there forever. And that's a great perspective to have.
Mm-hmm. All right. I've got something I want to try here. I want to go around the horn, all 3 of us. And I want you to, because we're all coaches, we all coach people in some regard or another, in some fashion or another. What are the 3 most important tools that you rely on, not for you as a coach, but the ones that you actually make people aware of that they can utilize to better themselves? Because we're not necessarily doing for them, we're doing with them. So therefore they have to become aware and then embrace the utilization of these tools in order to achieve the goals that they're looking for. So I tell you what, while you guys are thinking about it, I'll go first. And when it comes to public speaking, there are really 3 things that my clients are looking for. They either want to reduce or mitigate public speaking anxiety, they want to be able to speak more clearly, and they potentially want to remove any unwanted speech habits that are holding them back. So the 3 tools that I use are a very consistent framework, a template that I utilize so that you can speak with more clarity. The integration of more deliberate breathing so you have a sense of developing your own forward momentum, and then coordinated gestures, because over 50% of a message is delivered through body language. So those are my 3 most important tools. Who would like to go next?
Well, I'll go next, but I'll preface this that it's dependent on who I'm working with. But the things that I get most tend to be rooted in fear and self-worth. So one of the biggest tools that I use is gratitude. That's probably first and foremost. And we use that as a root emotion that we cling on to both in the nighttime, right before bed, and right when we wake up in the morning. And we take that a step further. We take that gratitude into where they want to see the direction of their lives going. So we future forward it, and we say, okay, this is the vision I have, and I'm so grateful for that, and I'm going to focus on this as much of the day as I can. And if I'm daydreaming, I'm going to come back to that, and I'm going to put little reminders out where I focus on that gratitude for what's coming in my life, and fully believe in that vision. And then I also do breathing techniques, specifically with vagus nerve activation or deactivation, as you may call it. And we kind of get out of that fight or flight, fear, anxiety mess because it's going to come back, and it's going to kind of just derail everything if we let ourselves get to that point. So that's another thing that we work with. And then the third one, kind of there's so many different directions I can go with this, but I guess the preface that everything is working out for my better good, and just coming back to that statement and that belief that, this is going to happen, and it may be good, it may be bad, and I'm going to embrace it, and just know that everything is working out for the best, for my best interest, and that belief system.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be my 3.
Okay. Good. Glenn, are you muted?
Yeah, sorry. I would say probably the top 3 are what if, imposter, and answer. So again, the what if this happens, and I keep explaining to them, what if it doesn't? What if this happens? What if it doesn't? Because if you worry about things, you're never going to get there. The imposter syndrome, what if they ask me something I don't know? None of us know everything. Ask for permission to get back to them, get the answer, ask an expert, whatever. People rarely are upset if you're going to ask an expert a question for them on their behalf. And then the answer. What if the answer is no? Or what if the answer is yes? Because when you walk into a meeting, you're trying to sell some things to someone, they're not your client right now. So you really don't have anything to lose. And if they say yes, don't be freaked out about having to fulfill it. So don't worry about the answer. Don't worry about what ifs. And don't worry about not knowing everything.
All right. Well, now we, along with all of our listening, viewing audience, have an idea of what the basic tools are. It's nice to be able to simplify things. And I tell everyone, yes, the concepts are pretty easy. It's the execution that's hard. So true.
Yes.
So with getting that subconscious, again, to talk to a little bit of conscious, are there baby steps? Are there good kind of rules to kind of start working on little things to help you get to big things? How do you kind of progress through little issues to getting up to major issues?
Yeah, well, it depends which way we tackle this. For some people, like you said, getting into little issues and kind of digging a little bit at a time is the way to go. But for other people, we want to get down to the root of it, and we want to change things from the root level up. So there's 2 different ways we attack both of those, so to speak. And for the little things, I love to suggest for neuroplasticity, doing things in a different way that you would normally do them. So if you're going to wake up and you're going to embrace gratitude, and you're going to have a vision of where your life is going, and you're going to be thankful for that, and that's coming soon, then you're going to maybe go and brush your teeth and do everything with your left hand for that morning, just to kind of reinforce it. I also like to say, if we can embrace and bring in other senses. So maybe take a shower with the lights off, and just, you don't use your sight. And this is better done at nighttime than during the morning, but right before bed, so that you have to rely on other senses. And it's great to do these mindset techniques and then bring something physical in. You can also learn something at that point too. It's another great way to reinforce it. But the more you do the mindset and the techniques, the more you're trampling down that grass of the path with the physical added in. So it makes it a much quicker route and path that's trampled down when you bring physical in.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like maybe some of the stuff that Paul does, or some of the things that I've helped people with, is get comfortable being uncomfortable, and you'll have a lot more ability.
Yes, that's a great one. I agree. You got to get out of your comfort zone.
This, to me, and I think I do this all the time, Glenn, I'll be listening to really good advice and then think to myself, yeah, but what about something that we said, that we have been saying, that seems like it's in conflict with that? And in fact, in some ways it is, but it is absolutely a description of the way that life works. And that is, we talk all the time about success coming from being consistent. And now we're talking about being changing around the pattern and being inconsistent. So this is just another example of sometimes we've got to be able to move in this direction, and sometimes we've got to be able to move in this direction in order to affect the kind of changes that are going to be positive in our life. So, and again, now I'm going to introduce one more term, which is the term of imperfect action. Have we talked about that? I know Glenn's nodding his head, obviously, but Jennifer, have we ever talked about that?
I don't know that we talked about that, but I think indirectly we might have before.
And it's what is holding you back, the need for perfection, the need to know, am I going in the right direction? Do I need to pivot? Do I need to change? And yes, there are circumstances that come up like that, but very often, I think you've been touching on that a little bit, Jennifer, the idea that even the imperfect action and the things that seem like they're vastly challenging are really pointing you in the right direction, but not being frozen so that you don't take action is certainly not a tolerable answer.
Yes. And I deal with this a lot with my clients. I tell them it's better to take action into something wrong than to stay still and do nothing. It's because you can pivot and you can move, and at least you've got momentum that you are trusting to take the next step. When you're frozen and inactive, you're going to not be able to move. Indecision's going to come up. Like you said, worrying about, am I doing this wrong? And that's when you're really getting into your head and you're kind of digging a grave for yourself, and that you're going to get more stuck by not moving than you are by taking a step in the wrong direction.
Yeah, there was a conference I went to years ago by a gentleman named Mario Brown that's a good, big online business coach. And his whole thing was constant imperfect action. Because if you wait for something to be perfect, guess what? It's never going to be perfect. And you will never earn the revenue, earn whatever you want to achieve for something down the road, for something you didn't do yesterday. So getting people, again, comfortable with being uncomfortable and doing something, even though it's not perfect, sometimes is a challenge. So how do you help people be comfortable with uncomfortable and take chances maybe more than their normal conscious will allow them?
It's about baby steps. And it's about doing little things to see the momentum, because once you have momentum, then you have evidence that you can do it again. And with that evidence and the momentum, it gets easier and easier. And sometimes it's just, okay, we're going to break this down and we're going to write something down on a paper. And that is an action step. And then the next session, maybe we're going to go from writing down on a paper to, okay, now you're accountable for doing, making a phone call to this person, or reaching out to this network, or going to an event. And I'm going to hold you accountable for that. And you're going to do it. And accountability is a big thing here when it comes to taking action, because a lot of people can't do that on their own. They don't have the capacity to do it. So they need someone like a coach to say, okay, you agreed to this, you're going to do it, and you're going to let me know when it's done, and we're going to celebrate it, and we're going to move on to doing something more.
Accountability is a big deal. I was going to ask the question, but you actually answered it already. What motivates most people to come and see you? Or, in the case of all of us, what motivates anyone to come and see a coach? And I know that I've had that question posed to me. And my answer is when somebody reaches a point where they just can't take it anymore. That's it. I can't go through that again. I just can't do it. So is it always a self-recognition, Jennifer, for your clients? Or
most of the time it is. You can't force somebody to do something they're not ready for. So it has to be at some point their decision to do it. But for a lot of times what they say it is for when they come to me is that I don't want to be this person anymore for my kids. I don't want to be this outward reflection to the people I know in my relationships anymore. I've had it with myself. I want to change.
Is a lot of it business based or is a lot of it personal for you in your experience?
It's interwoven. Very specifically, it's interwoven, and yes, all of the above. But I think where it really hits home is the emotional, relational aspect of it. As you know, I don't want to be this anymore because of this person or this relationship or these people in my lives that are seeing this, and I'm reflecting to. I don't want to be that example anymore. That's kind of really where it hits, because I don't think a lot of people come to me because they're like, I just am sick of myself. I don't like this. But then when we start digging down into, well, why did you come? What's, what is the reason for it? What do you really want to change? And it's, I want to be a better person, to be a better example, to be better, so that my kids can be better, so that my spouse or my friends, somebody that's relational to them. That's really where the motivation lies. It's not intrinsic. It's, an outward view of themselves as other people will see that.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we can peel one more layer off on that, how important is it, do you think, to share with people that most of what we deal with in our lives are communication and relationships? So if you can become better business-wise, business and relationship, you're probably going to be better personally, business and relationship and communication. If you're getting better at communicating and having better relationships with your family, you're probably going to be better at that in the professional world, because they are so interwoven. So how do you get them to understand that this is going to help you all the way around, not just the one point of focus or the one concern that you have?
It's something that we talk about in the first session, and that, how do you want to change? What do you want to change? Why do you want to change it? And we kind of look at it from all aspects. Like, we look at it from emotional, we look at it from physical, we look at it from relational, and we say, like, okay, this is what we want different. And then we tie it back to the same core and the same root, that when you address the root, it really does affect your whole life. When you look at it from a different perspective, you're going to see everything in your life from that perspective that's different. And it really is a life shift that does affect everything.
So when you change your perspective, you change what you see.
You change your life. Yeah.
Nice. So what are some of the coaching tools that you use to maintain accountability, so that people can be accountable to themselves along with your guidance? Are there daily check-ins? Are there spreadsheets they have to fill out? Is it the honor system? What do you do? What is the accountability? Do you regroup with them on a weekly basis? What does that look like?
For my clients that work with me, what I do is I take most clients on a 3-month, 12-week basis. And for those clients, it's a daily accountability sheet that they fill out. And we go, this is what I'm going to do today. And at the end of the day, they fill it out and they say, yes, I did it. And if they didn't do it, they give a reason to why they didn't do it. Why didn't I do this? And then they turn that into me at the same time every day. So it's a 2-part morning and evening or afternoon accountability sheet that we work with. And then the hypnotherapy clients that I use a lot of times become my coaching clients, because of the accountability and the inability to take action and to do it with trust, that kind of turns into a need for life coaching in many aspects. For some, that it's pretty clear that it was a phobia or something else that we address, then we're done. But for others, they just need some more, and it's a great segue into coaching from there.
But what happens when someone begins to feel a little bit of success in that direction, but having been down this road, that there's further that you can go? In other words, do you get clients who run at it hard in the beginning, see a little bit of progress, and then kind of get their foot off the gas, and it sort of eases down to a place not exactly where they wanted to wind up, but better. Does
Well,
that happen?
I'm drawing this out because I'm sure you've all seen this before, but this is, can you see this? This is the evolution of progress. And I share that with them, that you cannot expect it to be a linear path. It is not ever going to be a linear path. You are going to have, you're going to go forward and then you're going to get setbacks, and you're going to move forward and you're going to get setbacks. And that's life. That's how everything progresses. And you have to keep in mind that the journey is where you're focused on. The destination is out there, but life happens in the journey. So you've got to really embrace the journey and embrace the process, because it's ups, it's downs, it's, you know, it's tears, it's laughter, it's everything. And that is life. And when we can be in the present in life, we're really, truly living.
So do you ever have times when you're running into people that you just mentioned that what they did do, or if they didn't, why not? Taking it to the next level of, Paul, you remember Josh Beecraft that's been on this a couple of times. What he advises people and what he's done in his life is their daily non-negotiables. Either I do this today or I die, to help somebody get over or past the excuse, so I'll do it tomorrow. So for those people that are writing in why they didn't do it too many times, how do you address them so that they do this so they can achieve what they're looking for?
Well, it needs to be a pattern, first of all, because if you didn't do it because your kid threw up and you had to deal with, you know, being a parent, then that's that's okay. I get that. But if it becomes a pattern as, you know, I forgot, oh, you know, I just didn't have time for it, I was too busy. Then we address that, you know, maybe we need to dig a little bit further into what the root is, and do we truly address the root before we say, okay, now we can take accountable action each day. And it's different for everybody. I can't really answer that. But for the most part, the accountability sheets keep people accountable. They do what they say they're going to do because they put it down in writing and they commit to it, and they know that somebody else is going to be looking at it. So it tends to work really well. I very rarely have people that get in a rut of, oh, I didn't do it again. Just the act of doing that accountability each day.
Well, we're frozen there.
I believe we are. Hold on.
There we go. I see a little bit of a smile.
She's back.
Okay.
There we go.
So you mentioned people. Yeah, you froze for a moment. Now,
okay, sorry.
If we can expand on that real quick, you talk about people that are busy. And inevitably, the people I talk to and deal with on a regular basis, I find are busy being busy. They're not busy being productive. So how do you kind of break through that mind block that I'm busy because I'm doing all these things, but half or more of the things they're doing are really a waste of their time? It was so good it froze the internet, Paul. That was a good question.
That's it. A moment in time. I'm sorry, Jennifer. You just froze again. For everyone watching, we're having little technical difficulties. We lost.
Am I back?
Jennifer. You're back. You're back. All
okay.
Right.
I was busy. Right. I'm sorry.
I told Paul maybe that question broke the internet.
Okay.
Oh, the excuse of being busy is just that. It's an excuse. And it's an excuse that feels productive and good when it's actually counterproductive and so bad. It's something that people really have to be aware of, that just being busy for busy's sake is getting you nowhere. It's just giving you an excuse to stay in the comfortable. And that's what a lot of people need, to just hear that from someone. That, you know, okay, you're busy, but this isn't productive busy. This is just you're making yourself feel good and you're convincing yourself to stay in your comfort zone by being busy.
Right. So what advice would you give to anyone who is looking to make a change, but by making that change, it gets noticed by the people around them and they begin to question why they're making that change? I'm sure that can be, for someone who is sensitive to that sort of judgment or criticism, that can be a deterrent from taking long enough strides in the right direction. Yeah. What advice do you give to someone who might be experiencing that in their lives?
Yeah, that's a tough one because that can be a very close family member sometimes, like a spouse or a parent. And I've worked with clients like this, and we discuss, you've got your cheerleaders, and maybe you just have one cheerleader that you can share with. And this is a person that's got your back, and they are all for you improving yourself and getting better and getting towards the goal that you want. And people tend to intrinsically know who those people are in their lives. And they also intrinsically know who the people are that are going to say, hey, wait a minute, what are you doing? Kind of thing. And those are the people that you're not going to want to share your journey with, but you're going to want to share your journey with those people that are your cheerleaders that can give you that added momentum and added drive to continue doing what you're doing. And when people change, and when people change at a root level, you're right, a lot of people are not going to be comfortable with it, are going to question that. And you have to know and believe inside yourself that this is for my better good. And by bettering myself, I'm going to be able to help and better even more people. And you have to stay with that thought pattern that when I better myself, I can give more to other people, and I can be an example, whether they like it or not. You're still being an example for good and for growth. And that's the perspective that you need to take. And certain people are going to come in and out of your lives, and that is just reality. And we don't know who those people are that are going to leave or why they're going to leave. But when we stay with a preface that all things are happening for my good and for my betterment, then we have to realize that some people may not be for our good and our best interest. And we have to have boundaries with some people, and we might have to cut other people out of our lives or greatly reduce our interactions with them.
And that can be a very difficult thing to navigate and negotiate in a work situation, because not everyone's on the same change journey as as any individual. And again, patterns being patterns, they've been established, and some people are not at that point where they're ready to just allow you to change because somehow it affects them adversely. So,
and this is one conversation that I've had with a lot of clients, that this is kind of a positive for COVID and for work from home and more of a Zoom type workplace and phone call type workplace, that you can have that divide between certain people. And it's more comfortable to say, well, let's just, do this via email, or let's just pick up on the phone later this week when a person's kind of giving you a hard time for something.
Yeah. It's amazing we bring up limitations right as we're running out of time. So, Jennifer, if anyone would want to reach out and contact you, what's the best way to do so?
Well, I've now I'm on a practitioner platform called heal.me, and you can find me through heal.me just by my name, Jennifer Garman, or you can also go to heal.me/lifeonpurpose. And you can find me there to schedule an appointment with me. I have a free consultation as well as a intro to hypnotherapy session that you can book with me there, and coaching as well. And you can also find me on my website, which is jennifergarman.xyz.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. This has been great again. We are glad that you took the time to stop back and visit with us and our viewers.
Well, thank you so much, Paul and Glenn. It was great seeing you again, and I'm happy to come on anytime. I love it.
It's our pleasure, Jennifer. Thank you so much. And everyone watching, thank you as well.
We'll see everyone back here, same time, same channels next week. Take care, everyone.